Hey guys, I'm here today to talk about the books I read in the month of May. So I didn't read that many books in May, like compared to my average. I managed to get through 7 books, and I'm going to do a follow-on video from this, which is going to be like a sort of June plans video, and I'll briefly touch there on why I didn't read loads in May and how I hope to change that in June. So I'm just going to focus this video on the actual books. So out of the 7 books I read, I only actually really enjoyed one of them, and the rest I gave 3 stars or less, I think, in some cases. So it wasn't a spectacular reading month, but I am quite harsh on my ratings. So like some of these 3-star books, I'd still recommend them. I still think they're good books, but I just had issues which pulled them down a little bit. So the first one I'm going to talk about, which I think a lot of people will be talking about at the moment, is What Red Was by Rosie Price. So this came out on the 9th of May, so you can get hold of a copy now if you so wish. This is the advanced reader's copy, so it does look a bit different to this in its finished edition. So I decided to pick this up because I really felt like reading a contemporary novel that was a really sort of close look at a friendship between 2 young people after enjoying books like Normal People. And I think this is the sort of wave this book is riding. I mean, obviously she's been writing this for a few years, and I'm sure she started writing it way before Normal People was ever published, but I think that's the audience the publishers are trying to grab, and I sort of see why. So this follows 2 friends who meet in their first year at university. I'd call her a woman, but I'd call him a boy, so however we want to say it. They meet one another at university. He's super popular, he's super extroverted, he likes to be busy all the time. She's the complete opposite, so he's one of the only friends she has, and she lives a very sort of quiet, focused life. And fairly early on in the novel, they're at a house party and she gets sexually assaulted at the house party by somebody her friend knows, and she doesn't talk, she doesn't tell anyone, she keeps quiet, and we follow them both from that moment onwards and how it affects their relationship with one another, the trajectory of both of their lives. Now what I appreciate about this novel is that in a lot of books like this, the main event would be the assault, or there'd be some big epic thing that happens after the assault that is the pinnacle of the story. So when books sort of feel like they're building up to this big moment, and going in that there's going to be a sexual assault because that's what the book is sold as, and so I was reading it with trepidation knowing that was coming, but it didn't feel like there was this, it doesn't make it out to be this plot device, I didn't think. And actually what I found really interesting and really well done is the way it was dealt with afterwards. And I think for me, I found it quite clear that the author herself is a survivor of sexual assault, because the way she described living with it afterwards sounded more true than anything I'd ever read that dealt with this. So there was parts of this that I really enjoyed. I found it really readable. It's a really quick book to get through, but what I will say, and what I've read in loads of the reviews of this on Goodreads, is that it's a bit jumbled. So there's also a focus on class in this novel. Our protagonist is from a working class family, and her best friend is from a very wealthy family. His mother's a film director. And we get quite caught up in the mother's story as well, which I felt was unnecessary. We also get quite caught up in the friend's story as he gets more involved in drugs and alcohol. And then there's this story about his grandmother's house being sold, and his dad and his uncles struggling with it, and it just all felt a bit unnecessary, and also it didn't pull together at the end. So I think the main driver of the novel was really good, but I think it would have been a much stronger novel if an editor had just said, what is the point in all this around it, what are you trying to achieve? Because at some points I felt like it became a story more about his family than actually about our protagonist. So yeah, I gave this one 3 stars. I enjoyed it, and I'll be interested to hear other people's thoughts, but I just felt it got a little bit lost at some points. So the next one was actually my favourite book of the month, and it's Lowborn, Growing Up, Getting Away and Returning to Britain's Poorest Towns by Kerry Hudson. I've heard a few people talk about this one now, and I've heard everyone just rave about it and say it's one of their favourite books of the year. And I read this in 2 sittings, which was quite unusual for me. I don't tend to read books that quickly, particularly non-fiction books, but this is such an easy to read memoir, and it's a difficult one to describe. It makes it sound complicated. When you're reading it, it's really not. So how this is structured is that there's one timeline, which is Kerry Hudson's sort of, I guess, birth to the point of her being in her late teenage years and, you know, being an adult and making her own way. And then there's the other storyline, which is Kerry getting contacted by her publishers asking her if she'll write this book, and her revisiting the places she grew up. So we might have one chapter that's set in the 1980s, which is about her growing up in those towns, and then we might have another chapter that's set in 2018, which is about her visiting that same town, and so we move along through that trajectory. I thought that was such an intelligent way to do this, because it allows the sections that are about her childhood to just be about her childhood, for you to be in the moment of what it was like to live in such extreme poverty. And then it allows the contemporary chapters to analyse what that was like and how that's affected her as an adult, and also to look at whether those areas have changed today. So I love this. I think Kerry Hudson's a really warm person. You feel like you really understand what she's trying to say. I love how she speaks to people in the street. That's the opposite of me. Like, I don't just speak to strangers. It like scares me. But she'll just chat to anyone, and she got really great stories out of doing that. I guess the only negative I could say, and this isn't even a criticism as such, it's just that I expected a bit more like analysis of why these towns aren't looked after. Like what this is really is Kerry's experience of growing up the way she did, and then revisiting these places and talking to people who live there now and how they feel about it. And I loved all that, but what I would have loved a bit more is if there was a few more pages in this book and it was focused on actually giving us the stats. Like, I wanted to know the figures. I wanted to know why these towns aren't spent, like why money isn't put into them, how much money is put into other places like where I live, Norwich, which is a beautiful city. It's, you know, it's a fairly affluent city. Like, how much money, you know, in comparison, and how are those decisions made, the politics of it, just a bit more context outside of the experience of these towns. I think I would have enjoyed it a little bit more, but all that's meant is that I now have the urge to go away and learn all that myself. So yeah, I'd really recommend this. It's an amazing memoir, I think one that everyone should read, particularly if you're from the UK. So there's that one. The next one is a historical fiction novel I read. This is again an advanced reader's copy, all of these seem to be. This is Island Song by Madeleine Bunting. This was sent to me by Granta, and I was really excited about this because Madeleine Bunting is mainly known for writing non-fiction, and she's really focused on like wildlife and nature writing and islands. And this is set on Guernsey during the Second World War, and it follows Guernsey. Guernsey was occupied by the Germans, which is something I knew nothing about, and so it follows a woman called Helene who lives there and how she survives on German occupied Guernsey. And then there's a present day storyline. It's not present day, it's I think it's in like, yeah, it's in the mid-90s, and it's after Helene has just passed away, and her daughter has been left a letter telling her that the man she thought was her father isn't actually her father, and actually there's lots of things about her mother they didn't know, one being that she's from Guernsey, and so she starts to look into the history. So it's quite a stereotypical historical novel in that we have the past storyline, and then we have the present day storyline where they're researching the past, and they're talking to people from the past, and they're finding like old diaries and letters that helped them along the way. I enjoyed this. It's an easy to read book. It was compelling, I was interested in where it was going, and this sounds really cruel, but I'm being honest, it's nothing special. Like, I love historical fiction. There is so much historical fiction out there, there's so much to choose between, and I wouldn't say this is like one of the ones you have to run out there and get. I feel like a lot of people could really enjoy this, so I don't want to dissuade people from picking it up, but I guess in terms of the type of historical fiction I like to read, this just wasn't, like, this was just a pleasant, enjoyable read. And I also felt that it just got a little bit muddled at points. There was points when I had to keep flicking back to double check I was following the names properly. And also there's a slight plot twist towards the end, which I won't spoil. And I felt that the author had like purposefully obstructed some parts of the storyline so that would be a surprise, but it didn't make sense why those parts of the story were obstructed in terms of the narrative, other than that she wanted it to be a twist. Like, we'd been told everything else, that somehow that had just been missed so that we could be like, oh god. So I found that a little bit annoying because I just felt the novel could have done without that. But yeah, I enjoyed this one. Give it a go if it sounds like your sort of thing. I think if you enjoy authors like Kay Morton, the style of writing and, you know, the 2 timelines is quite similar to that, so it's worth looking into. And then I think I read this one next, and this is Emergency Contact by Mary H.K. Choi. And this is a YA novel that I picked up for the Asian readathon, and I really enjoyed this one. Do you know what, I was quite surprised because I read this super quickly in like, I think maybe like 2 days. And then when I went on Goodreads, it's got quite low ratings for a YA novel. Lots of people were being quite negative about it. So yeah, I guess it made me like think a little bit more about how I felt about the novel, but this is how I felt about the novel before I read any reviews. So this follows a young woman who's just gone to university in, I'm pretty sure, Austin, Texas, yes, and she is a real introvert. She doesn't really want to like mix and get to know loads of people, but her roommate is like super friendly and just wants everyone to be best pals, and so her roommate makes her go to a local coffee shop where a sort of relative of her roommate works. So let me just check the names. Yeah, so our protagonist is called Penny, and she meets this guy who's a few years older than her who works in this coffee shop, and effectively we get chapters from each of their points of view, and we find out from his perspective that he's just gone through a really messy breakup. He is like really struggling for money, and he actually works in this coffee shop and he lives in the coffee shop as well, and he is just struggling to get by. And within the first few chapters, Penny's out one day in the car and she sees Sam on the sidewalk having a panic attack, and she sort of goes to rescue him and to help, and she becomes his emergency contact. So in a sort of jokey way, they exchange phone numbers and say, you know, if you ever need someone to talk to about your mental health again, I'm here. And then they become really good friends. So a lot of this novel is actually through text messages, and as you can guess, a sort of you feel that there's some sort of attraction between the two of them, some sort of chemistry, and there's this awkwardness. They've spoken loads, they know everything about one another, but yet they've barely met, and so that's where the novel sort of goes. I really enjoyed this. I thought the text messages were done really well. I felt that there was chemistry between them. I was intrigued. I liked the way this dealt with, so Penny comments on the fact that she really struggles with her mum, and I felt that was dealt with well. So yeah, I thought it was really good. When I read other people's reviews, a lot of people had said that they really intensely disliked Penny. She wasn't a nice person at all, and that really put them off the novel. I don't know, like, I guess when I think about it, she wasn't like a really nice person, but she's also 18 years old, and like people change and people grow, and she wasn't horrendous, like she wasn't a really cruel person, so I found that a little bit odd. I think some people, and I think what I've learned from reading more YA and reading more people's reviews about YA is that I feel that people tend to want to really like the protagonist in YA fiction, and find it harder when there's a protagonist that perhaps isn't as likeable. That isn't an issue for me. I can read a book where you hate the main character as long as you can understand their motivations. So yeah, so I enjoyed this and I'd actually recommend it. I don't think it's a fantastic novel, but yeah, I'd if she brought out another book, I'd definitely pick it up, so take that for what you will. Then another YA book I read, I actually listened to on audiobook, and it's The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. I think that's how you say it. I'm not really going to dwell on this one. It's absolutely adored, and by YA readers and adult fiction readers alike. I saw so many 5-star reviews on Goodreads, and I listened to it on audio. I'm just a bit confused. This reads to me like the sort of book I would have tried writing when I was 15. I'm not saying I could have written something like this. I'd have given it up on page 6. But what I used to do when I was like 15 and I think I wanted to be a writer, I would decide I have all these really cool characters and these are the colour of the hair, like this is what they wear, they have really cool names, they all have really cool interests and like, they're all really individual. And then I'd be like, now I need a story to go round these characters. And it sort of feels like that's what she's done. There's too many characters, and for a significant portion I was just like, what are all these people doing? Like, it just seems like she wants there to be this like boy gang, and it just is too much. And then there's this magical element to it. It was just a bit confused, like something to do with ley lines and like Arthurian legends. Sorry, I've got fluff in my eye. There we go. The motivation for why the main boy character, I can't even remember his name, is so interested in ley lines is never really explained. Yeah, just thought it was a bit of a mess, to be honest, and really all over the place and jumbled. I'd give it like 1 star. The next book is Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata, and this is translated from the Japanese by Ginny Tapley Takamori. And this has been raved about loads. I'm not going to talk about it for very long. This follows a young woman who works in a convenience store, and she follows a really rigid daily routine, really structured. Her family are really worried about her because they're like, why are you not married with children? And there's all these like societal expectations on her, and then things start to change slowly. I enjoyed this. I thought it was interesting. I could completely picture the convenience store. Even now, thinking about this book, I have a really clear vision in my head of the convenience store, the way she moved around the convenience store, the characters' voices. But I guess with books like this that aren't like super okay, I find with books like this they're quite detached from the characters and they're quite cold, and I find books like that difficult to love because I really like to feel really connected to the characters even if I don't like them, and I really struggle with sort of minimalist like cold books, and I find this is that. So I gave this 3 stars. I enjoyed it, but I'm not you know, I don't love it as much as loads of other people did. I can still see why. This is just a it's me, not the book thing. So there's that one. And then lastly, there is The Magician's Assistant by Anne Patchett. I'm not going to talk about this one at all really because this was my Patreon book club book, and I will be filming a sort of non-spoilery and then spoilery discussion video about this one. So I'm going to talk about it loads there. I enjoyed this one. I very nearly gave it 4 stars, but I had a couple of issues which sort of pulled it back. But I'm really looking forward to talking about this one because I think quite a lot of people have read it, and I'm just interested to hear whether other people had issues that I did or not, or if they had any issues that I didn't have. So yeah, there is that one. So I feel like I've spoken for quite a long time about just 7 books. So thanks for watching. Let me know if you've read any of these and what your thoughts were, and also let me know how your reading month went in May. Thanks for watching. Bye.